All right, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith. In this video, I'm basically just going to list roughly 50 unique karate and karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu submissions that I knew before I even took BJJ classes. However, let me qualify this with you. My original karate instructor also had a first degree black belt in BJJ at some point. And so we actually did work on ground game about 3 days per month, but we worked mostly on standing submissions and takedowns and attacking a grounded opponent to finish them off if necessary the rest of the time. So about 50% of what we did in stand up was actually Japanese jiu jitsu and karate bunkai submissions. And then about 10% of what we did each month was ground game, which was basically BJJ being taught in the karate class, because it was Myers Family Karate and Japanese and Jiu Jitsu class was the name of the school. All right, so let's just list these submissions. Some of them are pretty simple, and some of them get pretty advanced. There's the front wrist lock, the full wrist lock, reverse wrist lock, double cross arm wrist lock, uh, rear naked choke. There's at least two different variants of rear naked choke that we learned in there. Full front choke, uh, cross arm breaker, full arm bar, and reverse arm bar, which are both banned in MMA because they involve a neck crank. Reverse neck breaker is banned in MMA. Standing back breaker is also banned as a neck crank in MMA. Sidearm control with is sort of a submission, but not really. Um, Front figure four ankle lock, reverse figure four ankle lock, calf slicer or calf crusher variants and variants of that. The accolade, which is kind of useless but good to know anyway, because the only way you're going to get the accolade on somebody is if you've already got them beat senseless anyway. Um, all right. This thing is called the Vice or filter, is what we called it. It does work, and I have tapped out black belts with it before. This is called stomach nerve number 9. I don't know why it's called that because it has next to nothing to do with your stomach, but it is in fact called stomach nerve number 9. Uh, there's this thing under your Adam's apple that I don't remember by name, but yes, probably should remember. Um, Let me think because I know several more of them, so I'm not lying. I just gotta clear my head for half a moment. It's easier to actually remember the technique than the formal name of the damn things for me. Uh, well, there's actually what they call first technique and second technique, which are pretty similar. That's all. That's what the name of it is. As a matter of fact, in Japanese, is first technique and second technique. Is where you pretty much just catch a straight punch out of the air with a middle block, which is kind of hard for most people to do. It's easier to catch the hook punch though, and you wrap them up into a different type of wrist lock than any of the four that I mentioned previously. And it's literally called first technique. It's part of Seisan Kata. Um, there's a Kamai where you actually pop someone's jaw out of socket with your thumb as you also rip their eyeball loose, which that's banned in MMA, by the way. And if you don't believe that works, try it on yourself. If you can put so much pressure on yourself that you'll have to stop doing it. So imagine what somebody else can do whenever they put their weight into it, either when you're in a standing position or if you're grounded and they're on top of you and they put their thumb in there and just rip your freaking jaw loose because it can be done. Um, that's called a kamae, Kamae. Uh, I know, but would never use the mandible claw because you got to be wearing gloves or a metal gauntlet to do that to actually hurt somebody. And there's more efficient ways of hurting somebody than sticking your hand in their mouth. Um, Believe it or not, Ric Flair's figure four leg lock works, and I've actually seen it used in an MMA match, and the person who did it won. It was a slight variation of it, and the other person immediately tapped out within 2 seconds flat once it was all the way on them. Because what happened is they kind of fell into one another's lap, and one of them knew it, and the other one didn't know what to do from that position. And the one who knew Ric Flair's figure four leg lock put it on the other guy and tapped him out instantly. I know that. I mean, pretty much sure anybody that watches WWE would know how to do that, but that's beside the point. It does, in fact, work, and it puts insane amounts of pressure all over both legs. It puts one leg under pressure on the shin, the other leg is under pressure on the knee. It's hyperextending the knee, and you also have an Achilles compression going on, and hyperextending of the hips as well going on. And so the person is going to tap out pretty much instantly once it's on. All right, so front figure four ankle lock and reverse figure four ankle lock. The reverse figure four ankle lock is what WWE calls the half crab, except they don't do it correctly on WWE because they don't want little kids actually doing this to one another, because you can, in fact, rupture your opponent's Achilles when you do it. Either they're going to tap or their Achilles is going to get ruptured, and then it's going to take a year for them to recover from it. And even when they tap, it might take a week or two for them to recover from it. I've had it demonstrated only at partial pressure, not even full pressure. I had to tap out before the person even put full pressure on me. I've actually lost a match to it with less than full pressure on it, because once it's on you, you will tap before they even get to full pressure. If they get to full pressure, you're going to be critically injured, because you're going to need surgery and a freaking year to recover from it. I don't know. It's not banned in MMA, but you never see them use it. Every once in a long while, you see the front figure four ankle lock used in MMA or in BJJ only. They get either a front figure four ankle lock or inside or outside heel hook on one another. But that's becoming less and less common in MMA. The reason why is in MMA, you're allowed to kick the person in the face while they're trying to put the front figure four ankle lock on you. In BJJ only matches, heel hooks and other ankle lock variants end probably more than half of all matches. So that's pretty much ideal to get a heel hook on your opponent in BJJ. Which, I'm like, I'm not even going to bother passing your guard anymore. If you're the grounded person, if for some reason you're grounded and I'm standing and found to be trying to pass your guard, I'm just going to go straight into an ankle lock and lock you down. Is the way I would do it. And in MMA, I would cross body ankle lock, not cross. I guess that is a cross position. A cross position figure four ankle lock is what I would say, so that your free leg is over there, not over here. So you can't just kick in front of me, and that way you have a much harder time kicking me while I apply it. Is what I would do. So, I'm not going to pass the guard, or not going to try to. I can do it, but I'm not going to in something like an MMA match or even a BJJ only roll. I would make them stand back up and let's roll again. Let's start the roll over again. I'm not just going to enter your guard nor try to pass your guard. I would just go ahead and lock you down or stand you back up. So let's see what else. I'm trying to think of the other submissions. So anyway, you got different types of scarf holds. There's a front scarf hold and a reverse scarf hold. A Darce choke, which is in pretty much all mixed martial arts, and martial arts has that. The guillotine, of course, and then you've got the Americana and the Kimura, which I actually learned in the karate class. Yeah, now I'm starting to remember some of those. All right, but anyway, and then it's like, well, what are some of the things I learned in BJJ that were not taught in the karate class? I would say most of the core skills of BJJ actually did get taught to me in the karate class, which is why I adapted to BJJ so easily. But some of the more obscure techniques that are taught, regardless of what white belt, through any belt that they're taught at, regardless of what belt level they're taught at, in BJJ, I learned in the BJJ class, in other words. So things like shrimping, because nobody ever mentions that in MMA. What is that? That was actually taught to me in the BJJ class. The spider guard and the pillow choke, which I think I've never seen it before until I was in BJJ. I was taught that in the BJJ. I was actually taught triangle choke in the karate class, but the triangle arm bar in the BJJ class. All right. Um, I was not taught a particularly effective way of defeating the triangle arm bar or triangle choke in the karate class because since they never got around to that for whatever reason. Um, but first of all, in the BJJ class, of course, they're going to teach you to keep both hands together as much as at all possible, and never let your opponent, even if you're going on top, certainly never let them isolate one of your arms with their legs or anything like that. Because if you do, you're halfway to a triangle arm bar, and you're never going to break their legs with one free arm. You're never going to break your other arm out of leg strength because a well-trained human being's leg strength is anywhere from 2 to 4 times greater than their arm strength. All right, and that applies to both striking and grappling. So there's no way on God's creation to break out of an arm triangle once it's on you, unless the other person didn't have it on you right to begin with. Um. Uh. But you can prevent them from getting it on you by following some simple rules. Like I said, keep your hands together, not apart, and that sort of thing. Um, trying to think of what is that other thing called? It's another. I don't know. I probably listed 30 something stuff altogether. Either fumbled through it or named it. I'm starting to remember a few things. But the the BJJ class, one of my criticisms was that the pro fighters did not focus on striking enough, and this is why they got beat when they got beat at the pro tournaments too, because they didn't have enough striking background. And also, my other criticism at Gracie United, anyway, I don't know how other BJJ schools do this, but at Gracie United, whenever they start a roll, they start on the kneeling position. They don't actually start standing up, which kind of pissed me off because that negated half of my prior skills. Because I'm going to use my judo and karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu background to get a superior position from standing before we even go to the ground if they would have let me start from standing position. But anyway, they start from kneeling position at Gracie United, and then you roll from kneeling position, which I don't like that because in a street self defense situation, hopefully 99% of all street self defense situations start from a standing position, at least unless you're totally caught off guard. And all professional fights start from a standing position, almost 20 feet apart from one another. So I didn't like the whole start from a kneeling position 3 feet away from one another in Gracie BJJ. And I'm not sure if it was just that one school doing it that way, or if because it was the entire Gracie United chain doing it that way, or if all BJJ schools do it that way, and what their reasoning is, because it seems to not involve your judo and Japanese jiu-jitsu background if you have such background. So, and they only worked on judo tie-ins to BJJ like one day per month or something there, and it was just like it was very frustrating to almost the rules of engagement in their dojo. And matter of fact, he literally had a rule that unless you were a blue belt, you couldn't even practice joint locks. So unless you were a blue belt or above, you weren't even allowed to use joint locks. Except me, because I was an exception and considered to be brown belt equivalent, but different because of my Japanese jiu-jitsu background. He did, in fact, let me use the joint locks. But for the rest of the students who didn't have enough training, he didn't want them overusing or injuring somebody with joint locks if they didn't know what they were doing. All right. And what do I mean by variance versus the norm? So in MMA, if you do a front wrist lock, you're only allowed to do one where you grab across all four fingers or across the palm of the hand. In karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu, we actually prefer that you use 2 or 3 fingers because it makes it easier to make the lock work and also easier to break their fingers or other bones in their hand or wrist. So the very reason that they don't want you grabbing fingers in MMA is the reason that in a street self-defense situation or a combat situation, you actually would want to grab just 2 or 3 fingers and go ahead and break as many bones as possible. All right, so each of those is a variant. For example, like that's a variant, that's a variant, that's a variant, that's a variant, and that's a variant. And I know that's a little bit facetious, but whatever. That's like 6 variants. But that's why I can rightfully say that yes, I know about whatever 50 something total submissions by name, and then about another 200 variants of those submissions, because that's how that is counted, and that's what it means to be a submission variant. And when you're a little bit rusty, remembering the formal name of these things is a lot harder. As I said, it's easier to do the technique than it is to remember what the formal name of some of them are. So forgive me. But anyway, I hope you see that I'm not blowing smoke or there obviously there's stuff like the hammer lock and the full Nelson or hurt lock and stuff like that, which we taught those to both the move and the escapes of those moves. Matter of fact, in Isshinryu karate, when they teach you a submission, they almost always teach you at least 2 ways to either prevent the submission getting on you in the first place or to escape the submission once it is in fact on you. It's pretty much ideal to know 2 escapes to every submission. And some of them have more than 2 escapes. Some of them have as many as 4 or 5 reliable ways of escaping. So, those are less reliable submissions, but, some stuff works on people that doesn't obviously not work, but whatever. And then, of course, because it was a karate class, we worked on combined striking, getting a joint lock on somebody with one hand versus their arm or their foot, and then attacking them over and over with our free hand or free knee or free foot for a kick. So that's called combined submission striking, or just combined striking for short. When you combine a submission and a striking maneuver into the same combination, we call it combined striking for short. A term which, by the way, I have never once heard an MMA announcer use, because for the most part, they don't know it. They don't understand the concept of catching an opponent in a wrist lock or an ankle lock and punching them in the face or kicking them in the solar plexus over and over again until they tap out. Because if they did, they'd be using that, and they don't use it, even though it's there. And it's actually legal as long as you don't break the no grabbing the glove rule and no grabbing individual fingers rule. It's actually there and legal. That is, but they don't know that concept because they've never been taught that conceptually. But in Isshinryu karate, that concept is called combined submission striking, or combined striking for short. And on that note, we're 18 minutes and 30 seconds into the video. I'm going to have to sit down and write down the names of additional ones that I know by name that are a little bit more obscure than those I already listed, because I did not list 50. I probably listed 3 dozen, but I did not list 50, and that actually disappoints me that I'm starting to forget the formal names of those too. It tells me I need to do some polishing up again. Yeah, let me end the video. So if anybody watches this, just know that I'm not BSing you or anything like this. I was pretty darn good when I was 20 years old, and still pretty darn good, although already starting to have symptoms of major illnesses, even whenever I was in Gracie United the first time. Again, don't judge me by the fact that I'm 45 years old or out of shape because I'm sick, because I am severe type 2 diabetic, and I've had 4 TIAs or mini strokes since all this happened. So that's a different matter. So you can't say, well, you're overweight and whatever. Yes, I'm overweight. Whenever I was this good and much younger, I was exactly at ideal weight. So, when you get sick and have 4 strokes or whatever the hell they are, see how good a shape you are in after the fact. You better thank God if it does happen to you and you can still speak and walk after the fact, as I still can. Be glad, because while it was happening to me, I could not speak. I could not get 2 words out of my mouth or even 1 word out of my mouth because I was stuttering, and I never stutter when I'm healthy. Matter of fact, nobody in my family stutters. So uh yeah, it's a mini stroke of some sort. Whether you want to call it a TIA or a stroke or something in between, I don't know. But whatever it was neurological and it wasn't good.